I'm Jerry Garfinkel. I'm the treasurer of the Jewish Study Center. I welcome you all to our class tonight. It's about children's literature, Jewish literature for children, or Jewish children's literature, whatever you want to say. Um, but first, as treasurer, I always tell people that our classes are free, but we do have expenses, so we encourage donations. There's no requirement, and we don't give a suggested amount. So it would be nice if you donate something to us. If you want to donate, go to our website www.jewishstudycenter.org. Click on donate, and you can then donate from your PayPal account or with your credit card or by a check. If you click on check, it'll give you an address to where you send your check. I think it's my treasurer remarks, but I'm also the technical director, and as such, I'll give you some technical comments. As you probably realize, this class is being recorded. After the class is over, I will cut off the part that the recording started before I began. I'll cut that part off, and I'll post the recording on YouTube, and I'll send an email to everybody who's registered about where the recording is. Meanwhile, everybody is muted, but we do want your questions and your comments. So write your questions and comments in the chat box. Address them to everybody. You may have a question, and someone else in the audience will answer your question in the chat box. Sometimes the comments start having a little traffic with each other. And also, I believe the closed captions are on. So if you can't understand my remaining New York accent, or if you have other problems hearing what we're saying or understanding what we're saying, you can look at the closed captions. I believe that's all I need to say. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll introduce Mindy Reiser, who was our vice president, and she will I find her. She will introduce the speaker of the day. So, Mindy, it is yours now.
Unmute. Greetings, everyone. It's always a delight to see folks from all over the country and other countries too. It is a real pleasure to introduce Judy Ehrenstein, who is a children's librarian in Montgomery County, Maryland, and served on the Association of Jewish Libraries Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee from 2022, I'm sorry, 2020 to 2022. Judy is currently co-editor of Children and Teen Book Reviews for the Association of Jewish Library News and Reviews, which is a quarterly member publication. And she also writes reviews for the Jewish Book Garden blog. And I encourage you to look for that. I can read it out, but it's something easily findable. She lives in Silver Spring with her husband and has launched two book-loving children. So, Judy, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you. My name is Judy Ehrenstein, and I'm a children's librarian with Montgomery County Libraries. And I just have to start off by saying I'm very happy to be here tonight. I represent myself, not the libraries, not the county who pay me. And any mistakes of crediting publishers and dates or misspeaking is all mine. Let's see, we'll let somebody else into the Zoom. So what I have prepared is kind of my thoughts about literature for Jewish American children, which I'll do a little bit of background and in the context of the world of literature in general, both in the past and present. And then I'm going to talk a lot about some recent things so that you can see a lot of what is coming out with a Jewish focus for youth, meaning anybody from a baby through high school age. And we all have lots of jargon, so if I say stuff that you don't know, I will try to notice in the chat and define some things. I recognize a couple people who are librarians in here, so in the Zoom, and so it's a little intimidating. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Oh, okay. Somebody else is going to let people in. I'm going to share my screen here, and here we go. Okay. So I call this A Century of Literature for Jewish American Kids. It's probably a little bit more than a century, but we can round some things. Really, before the 20th century, children weren't as much considered a special age group that needed to be catered to. There are certainly things that children read in the big world that now we go, I can't believe that was read by children at this time. I know that in my library we have The Hobbit in the children's room, although I would say that the majority of people who read Hobbit are beyond the age of about 13. And the same is kind of true in the world of writing of Jewish books. It's a lot of things more in a religious bent, writing down of folklore, a lot of Helm stories. And as the 20th century dawned and World War II happened, where World War I happened, there was a lot more recognition of excellence in literature specifically written for children. And what you see on the screen are the two big medals from the American Library Association. There's a John Newbery Medal on the left, which was first awarded in 1922. That is for works of fiction, excellent fiction. The Randolph Caldecott Medal is for awarding the illustrations, but the text of the book has to be of excellence as well. A lot of the ALA awards have requirements of being either American citizens or American residents. And that narrows down the books because we have lots of great books written or illustrated by people who live in other countries, a lot of Canadian books that don't get considered. But fortunately, the Association of Jewish Libraries and the Sidney Taylor Book Award and a number of their other awards don't have those kind of rules. We don't really care where people live or their citizenship. We're looking for good books that are Jewish content. Let's see, I'll go on. So I'm going to let people put in the chat, and I'm going to open up the chat. What do you remember reading that you think of as a Jewish book? And I'll start off by saying I'm 62. I remember reading All of a Kind Family, and I remember reading a couple of Escape from Germany right before World War II really got bad, and specifically Journey to America by Sonia Levitin and When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit by Judith Kerr. But I don't really remember reading a lot of Jewish books, probably because there weren't huge numbers of things. I remember in Hebrew school, Sandy Koufax, the book about Sandy Koufax was the hot book that was always being taken out from the library. But I don't know if anybody else has other comments. Let's see, All of a Kind Family. I was a bit Zot the Goat, All of a Kind Family. Yep. Talking about God. Yeah, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Right. Tell Me a Mitzi. Katantan. Right. Yep. Yes. Started about 38. Caldecott was, 38. And Newbery was 22. Let's see if we have any other comments. But Shalom Aleichem. Yeah, a lot. And that was a lot of what was around. There wasn't a huge amount. Let's see if I have any other books. Wiseman of Helm, Diary of Anne Frank. Yeah, some of the same stuff. My grandmother's stories, Molly's Pilgrim. Okay, The Giver. Yeah, I'm gonna mention all of those. Oops, I went ahead in my thing. Sold the stuff, but I was already an adult. Yeah, I have to say, I also had that kind of thing of I read books as an adult that I think were around when I was a Jewish kid growing up in New York. Um, so the other question is, what makes a book a Jewish book? And why is it important to have books that we consider Jewish books? Um, Now, according to the Association of Jewish Libraries, and this is from Linda Silver back in 2007, and she was I'm not sure if she's still alive or not, a big name in librarianship of children's literature, that you want a Jewish setting, you want Jewish characters, you want Jewish values, you want Jewish themes, and things that will resonate with Jewish families, with Jewish kids. And why are they important? They are important because we all need to see ourselves in what we read. Rudine Sims Bishop was a famous professor of librarianship, and she coined the terms windows, mirrors, and sliding glass. Books are windows opening views of the world. I think I'm actually gonna close the window with my faces so I can see that. Sorry. Books are often sometimes windows offering views of worlds. They may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers only have to just walk in so that they join that world that's been created or recreated. And most of all, for Jewish kids, a window can also be a mirror. We can reflect back our own stories, stories that are either part of our past or part of our family's past, are part of the greater Jewish world, and that we can see ourselves in books. And this isn't just true for, I'm going to stop my share for a moment. This isn't just true for Jewish kids. This is true for anybody who is not white, Christian, straight, well off, any of those kind of things. Everybody deserves to see themselves reflected in a book. And there's been, in the past number of years, there has been a huge increase in books written by and for African American kids, for Latino kids, for Asian American kids, for gay kids, for everybody. There are for biracial kids, for everybody. Everybody deserves to see themselves in a book. And also, we also deserve, as Jews, to have other people see us and learn about us. Let's see. Where was it? So yes, and librarians, the front line of fighting to keep these books on the shelves. That is true. Um, Books on book challenges, there were often a lot of books that just because they validate the experience of others, um, that are not white and Christian, there are some people who feel that this negates their acceptance. And First Nations, yes, definitely. Let's see. Everybody deserves to be seen. Let's see. I'm going to look to see what these other comments is. Yes, we also deserve to see. Yes, we don't also want just Holocaust books. I think there's a lot of comments in here that I'm not going to get a chance to read before everybody says everything. And hopefully, yes, all of these are Ashkenazi in origin. That's another thing that gets addressed. I will try to get all of this, and then I'll go back through the chat to make sure I got everything. Um, let's see, where are we again? So, um, in there was a librarian in the Boston Public Library, which is where I had my very first job, Fanny Goldstein, who highlighted many of these affinity weeks that still exist. Often there are months now. And the West End branch, there was Negro History Week, Catholic Book Week, and in 1925, Jewish Book Week, which just this past year celebrated 100 years. In 1935, it became a month, and then in 1940, it became Jewish Book Month, and it's basically mid-November to mid-December. So that's a lot of times when you see book fairs and author talks, and it's a great opportunity to see what's new and buy some new books for Hanukkah gifts. And in fact, this past year, Richard Michelson wrote a book about the start of Jewish Book Week called Fanny's Big Idea. And this is from Roaring Pond Books, which is from Penguin Random House. Richard Michelson has written a lot of books with highlighting mostly famous Jews. He does a lot of biographies. Let's see. So early on, what was there to read? Now, this is going back into the mid 30s. I think pretty much everybody on the Zoom is beyond that age, but there was Sadie Rose Weiler-Steen, and she wrote about Katantan, the little boy, kind of like a Tom Thumb kind of thing. And it was published by the Women's League of the United Synagogue of America. So you can see that it was basically Jews publishing books for Jewish children. And that's still kind of true. She wrote some other books. Oops, what happened here? Oops. What the Moon Brought, which I think I have a copy of. My late mother-in-law was a huge fan of that book. And you can see that Katantan Sukkot Adventure is still around. Jewish Publication Society republished it in 2016. And there's lots of these Katantan stories. They're very sweet. They're very fun. Um, they're fairy tales, and they're fun little adventures. And then we get to a little bit more the beginning of the modern era. Oops. And oops, that was not it. We get All of the Kind Family books by Sydney Taylor. And you could see the very first cover from 1951. Sydney Taylor was born in 1904 in New York, and her birth name was Sarah Brenner. She was a modern woman. She was an actress and changed her name to Sydney Taylor. And she told stories of her childhood growing up on the Lower East Side of New York in a family. And she told these stories to her kids. And at some point, she wrote them down, stuck the manuscript in a drawer, and forgot about them. But her husband knew about the manuscript, and Follett was running, who's a publisher, was running a contest, and he submitted it for her, and that started it all. So many of you remember reading All of a Kind Family. Growing up, I remember reading it, even though it wasn't, and I read it probably as the more the more colorful cover, and there's since been newer covers of it. The last book, Ella of All of a Kind Family, came out, I think, in the 1980s or 90s. But they're just little slices of life growing up in the pre and post World War I time period. And I have a couple stories about All of a Kind Family. I was at a publisher lunch at ALA, American Library Association, a few years ago, and I was talking to a woman who was Chinese American, first generation, grown up in Chinatown in San Francisco, and I had said that I had just finished being on the Sydney Taylor Book Award Committee. And she goes, "Oh, I loved those books. They were just so wonderful." This is a book that spoke to her. There was nothing in common with her in terms of being Jewish. She wasn't Jewish, she was Chinese American. But to her, this was still a world she was really happy to join in. I've had this same comment from other people, and I've also had kids, Jewish kids, I work in White Oak and we have a large Orthodox community, and kids have gone, "Oh, I love reading this because they're Jewish just like me." So again, we've got windows and we've got mirrors going on there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna go.
Thank you.
Oops. And in 2024, oh, it's Richard Michelson again. He wrote a biography of Sidney Taylor called One of a Kind. So not only can kids read the books, they can read about who created them. Um, just an aside, a lot of the books that have been published have been written by women. I don't really know why that is, but a lot of these books, and this was noted in something that I read, were just have female authors. Um, it's not entirely true in publishing, but it certainly is pretty common. Moving on in time, we've got Barbara Cohen, who I remembered reading as a kid and then probably as a young librarian. She wrote Carp in the Bathtub, which was originally published by Lothrop, Lee, and Shepard in 1972. I don't know if any of you have grown up where somebody bought a live fish, stuck it in the bathtub in order to make it into gefilte fish, but that's the story of Carp in the Bathtub. And when the kids name him for the husband of somebody in their apartment building, it becomes very difficult to me for him to become the meal. She also wrote a book called Molly's Pilgrim, which has been republished with newer illustrations and made into a movie. It's a girl, I believe the time period is probably the 70s or so when there was a lot of Russian immigration of Jews to the US. And it's Thanksgiving, and Molly comes home and says to her mother, "I need to dress up like a pilgrim." And so her mother goes, "Well, what's a pilgrim?" And she explains that there's somebody who come to a country for religious freedom. And so she dresses up like her mother. And it's a book about understanding about what is a pilgrim, what is the concept of searching for religious freedom and moving for that. Oh. And then of course we have Judy Blume, who was in her heyday when I was a kid, and I'm going to make a full confession here. I don't think I've read a single one of these books, or if I have, it's been a really long time. They just didn't speak to me, but they spoke to many, many kids, a lot of girls, Jewish and not. Um, and what Judy Blume has done in her books is what is done in many, many books since, both for Jewish kids and for kids in general, is that she has seen the world of the young developing child growing into themselves, into being an individual and questioning who they are, what they believe, what they don't believe. And so there was a lot, so that's a lot of what I think made her books and a lot of other books really speak to a lot of kids. I'm not really sure why they didn't speak to me, but they didn't. Um, and let's see. Let me see. I'm going to go and stop the share and I'm going to look to see if there's anything in the chat. Yeah, it's Judy Blume, blah, blah, blah. Uh, yes. You will note that none of the books that I have highlighted here have to do with the Holocaust. I will touch upon the Holocaust, but it is not the majority of what I am talking about. I am talking mostly what I focused on is Jewish joy, because we need Jewish joy. Everybody needs joy in the world. We need to see ourselves, and we need to see ourselves not as victims, but as contributing, powerful people. And that is true of African American kids who don't only need to read books about slavery and the civil rights movement. Um, Yes, we can. Let's see. Somebody said, can't we derive so much about reading about families totally unlike ourselves? That is very true. That is very true. And that's why it's important to read widely. anthropomorphic guide. I'm not sure I am in the position to address that. Okay. Think I've seen a lot of comments about Jewish contributions to America. I will address that also. Lots of good books being mentioned. Okay, Jewish Joy, yes. Okay, so the next part is I'm going to go on and talk about serving on the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee and um, how amazing that was and quite overwhelming. I'm going to show you the books that we chose as our medal winners. And the books about Israel, Marjorie, yes. And that is something I was going to address. And I'm a little intimidated seeing you in this Zoom. So I applied in right before the pandemic to try to be on the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee. I was at the point where my kids were getting bigger and I felt like I could, and I was a little bored with work and I felt like I could take on a new challenge. And so one of the things that I had to do was I had to write a book review of a Jewish book. And so I did that. And then I get this email saying,
Hello.
hey, we want you on the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee. And there were, I think, 5 or 6 of us on the committee. We had we had the previous chair on the committee guiding us, Susan Kussel, who is now an author, and she lives in Northern Virginia, and she's an amazing source of information about Jewish children's books, who could probably give an entirely different talk than I have. And we were from all different kinds of positions. We had writers, we had school librarians, public librarians, people who were Orthodox, people who were Reconstructionists like myself. So we had a real mixture of backgrounds. And we received probably about 175 books. These were picture books, meaning that they are basically 32-page books with lots of illustrations. We received books that were big fat tomes, a lot about the Holocaust. We received an incredible number of books that were specifically about Anne Frank. We received lots and lots of holiday books and lots of books that were either realistic stories, a lot of them had to do with the upcoming Bar Bat Mitzvah and the angst it was causing, a bunch of fantasy and some horror, and all published within the year before. Yes. So all the book awards say they might say I served on the 2020 and 2021 publishing years. So the awards are considered the 2021 and 2022 awards because they get announced in January in the new year. And so I'm going to show you the books that we chose. If I can find the share again. Here. So these were my 2 years of winners. We had winners that got a gold medal. We had honor books that got a silver medal, and we had a whole bunch of notable books that got a bronze medal, and it probably added up to close to a dozen books each year that we were honoring. I am happy to say that all 6 of these books that are highlighted for my 2 years of winners, these are all mainstream publishers. They publish a range of books. I do have a slide that talks about specifically Jewish publishers, and they do publish a lot of books that are for Jewish kids, but mainstream publishers are publishing books with Jewish content. Welcoming Elijah by Leslie Newman, illustrated by Susan Gall, is a Passover story. Leslie Newman is a prolific author of books, often with gay characters, because she is gay herself, with you see range of color in her people in her books, and she really addresses Jewish life in a very modern, engaging, and approachable way. Turtle Boy by Evan Wilkenstein is a book about a boy who has a deformity, who is also getting ready for his bar mitzvah. And he, for his bar mitzvah project, befriends a boy who is chronically ill and in the hospital. And so it is a story of connection between two kids who both share having some medical issues, but also, how do you become a mensch? Um, Dancing at the Pity Party by Tyler Fetter is a graphic novel. And for those of you who are not acquainted with the term, graphic novels are the fancy word for basically like extended length comic books where there's blocks of there's blocks on the page and there's lots of illustrations and the text is a lot less. Mouse is probably one of the most famous graphic novels. Marjan Astrape's Persepolis is also a graphic novel for adults. Graphic novels are really popular with kids. So Dancing at the Pity Party is for teenagers, and it was about Tyler's own experience having her mother die when she was a teenager and dealing with the grief and everybody who didn't know what to talk to her about. My second year, we chose The Passover Guest by Susan Kusel. So we were honoring really one of our own. It is a retelling in the Depression era Washington, D.C. of a classic story of it's Pesach and there's a knock at the door during the Seder, but it's a very, very poor Seder. There's not really much there. And the guest comes in and he is a magician. Uri Shulevitz had a book called The Magician with a similar story. I think it might either be Sholem Lechem or a singer story or somebody else. And somebody probably should correct me on that one. Yeah, okay. Oops. And our middle grade, meaning elementary school through into middle school age, was Vera Hiranandani's How to Find What You're Not Looking For, is based on her own background. She has a Hindu Indian dad and a Jewish Ashkenazi mother. And I believe she identifies as Jewish. And I'm pretty sure her husband is Jewish. And this is about her experience and her family's experience growing up where the older sister in a Jewish family elopes with an Indian man and how she kind of deals with it in her Jewish identity. She writes some really good books for kids with a really great new angle to things. And then the final book is the first of a series of books by Aidan Polidoros, The City Beautiful. This is a queer love story. It is a fantasy horror book chasing around Chicago during, I think it was a World's Fair. It wasn't the easiest read for me because I'm not a big fantasy and I'm definitely not a horror read. And in terms of like all people say, how did you read all those books? The honest truth is you make piles. You look at a book and you go, this book doesn't, you flip through it and you're like, the pictures are really awful. Sometimes you start reading a book and you go, the story doesn't make sense. And because this was a Jewish Book Award, sometimes you read a book and you go, was there something Jewish about this book? And there are definitely books that promote Jewish values that are not Jewish books, but generally for the Sidney Taylor Book Awards, there has to be like flat out Jewish content for the books to be considered. It was a great experience to be on a committee. We definitely had lots of differences of opinions about books, and we had to convince each other about things. And sometimes you win, and sometimes you don't. And that's okay. That's the way it works. You can still love a book and promote it in your library. Um, Now, in terms of publishing, and this is based on what I see in my library, what I see coming through the book reviews that I read and I edit and write for the AJL News and Reviews, the Association of Jewish Library um, members' quarterly newsletter, is that there's gobs of books that come out about Hanukkah. Passover is the next most popular holiday, and then there's the Holocaust. And I've selected this picture specifically because there's a book later on that this picture is part of. That's from the Holocaust Museum downtown in Washington. Um, there are definitely more books being written about other Jewish holidays. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot get a good amount. There's not a gobs about, there are things about Purim. There's not gobs about Tu B'Shvat. A lot of times people have to just pick tree books. I don't know that there's anything about Lag BaOmer that I've ever seen. Shavuot, there's not a whole lot about it. Um, if you think about it, what also happens around Hanukkah? Christmas. There are so many books that come out every year about Christmas, and publishers and authors recognize this, and so there's Hanukkah books. Likewise for Passover, you have lots of Easter books. Um, and they are of all different kinds of content. They are books that talk about the holiday itself, the symbolism of the holidays, and then a lot of them are just stories about Jewish families celebrating holidays. Um, I am going to break away from my big breakdown of books, but well, I guess I am starting with my breakdown of books. I want to just look at the chat here and see what else people are saying. Do I know if mainstream publishing has changed post October 7th in the publishing world? Um, you know, I would say that um, there has been a concern that that has put a damper on things. I don't know that we're seeing it yet because I feel like we're still getting a lot of books to review. We, as in the people who review, but things get submitted to publishers earlier than you would think because there's a big time lag to when something gets bought and when it eventually comes out through the editing and publishing process. I think it is definitely a concern. Um, One thing I have noticed and it might just be what I'm looking at, is that right now is Jewish American Heritage Month. It's also Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I've seen more notice in some like publishing oriented things that highlight the Asian American Heritage Month more than they highlight Jewish American Heritage Month. It's not a scientific study at all, but that's something I've noticed. Um, Folklore is a big thing. This is traditional literature of all cultures. Writing it down is a much more recent thing. These are a lot of things that are stories that have been passed down through the generations. These are all very famous books that all have won either the Zlata the Goat and Other Stories by Isaac Singer with pictures by Maurice Sendak. That was the 1966 Newbery Honor book published by HarperCollins. It was probably Harper and Row at the time. 1978, Caldecott Honor from Macmillan went to Margot Zemach's It Could Always Be Worse. That's a story where the man says his house is too crowded, and then goes to the rabbi, and the rabbi says, bring in your goats, bring in your chickens, and he learns that it's not so bad. And then in 1977 or 1997, the Caldecott Honor went to David Wisniewski's Golem. So very traditional stories. Some of these probably have some Chelm stories in there, but these are mainstream, big, big, big awards, big publishers going to Jewish content books. More recently, we have had a lot of versions of the story of the tailor. Joseph had a little overcoat by Sims Tabak. Got a Caldecott Medal in 2000, also published by Viking. Jim Aylesworth and Barbara McClintock, neither of whom are Jewish, did My Grandfather's Coat, which is an Ellis Island kind of story from Scholastic. And Phoebe Gilman did Something from Nothing. This is a PJ Library repub, and it got a Sidney Taylor Award. I'm going to stop a share for a moment and ask. How many of you know the story that's being referred to here? Let's see. Let's see. Just a show of some hands. Okay, Elaine knows this story. Let's see. Anybody else know the story of the tailor? Okay, Melanie.
I know this.
You know the story? Okay, but Hannah, I'm going to tell it to you. Okay, Susan Kimmel, good. I'm glad to see you. All right, I'm going to tell you the story. Sometimes you can do this as a cut and tell story, but I'm just going to tell it. There once was a man. He might have been a tailor. He might have been a peddler. But at any rate, he has a coat. And he wears that coat all the time. He wears the coat so much that it wears out. But he goes, I think I can do something with this coat. So he takes his scissors and he cuts this big long coat down into a jacket. And he wears it until it seems like it's worn out. And yet, he's like, I know there's something more I can do with it. So he takes his scissors and he cuts, and he makes himself a vest. And he wears the vest, and he wears the vest, and he wears the vest, and it seems like it's all worn out. But he's like, no. I can make a scarf out of it. And so he takes his scissors and his needle and thread, and he sews it together, and he's got a scarf. And you could also make a bunch of other things out of it until at long last, there's just a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit left. And he makes a button, and he sews the button on to his clothing, and he uses it, and he wears it and wears it and wears it until one day the button is gone. I had a coat, I had a jacket, I had a vest, I had a scarf, I had other things, I had a button, and now it's all gone. But you know what? I've got something left. I've got a story, and I just told it to you. That's a much, much shorter version of it, but that is the gist of what all those books are. I don't know if that's how everybody has heard it, but that's basically the story that is told by all of those books. Let's see. I'm going to go on a little faster. All right. So I'm going to give you a quick run through of what we're seeing currently. These are books that came out for the fall of 2025 for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Sarah Arieste is Sephardic, or she's a singer, and she is a one-woman powerhouse bringing the Sephardic world and Ladino to Jewish families, recognizing that not every Jew is from Eastern Europe or Central Europe and is Ashkenazi. And so she has lots of books. She has illustrated books she has board books. These are the books that are like 8 to 10 pages on cardboard. And so she's got Anyada Buena Shana Tova from Carben. Then there is Erica Lyons, Lily's Hong Kong Honey Cake. I believe Erica Lyons lives in Hong Kong and is part of the small Jewish community there. This is a story of Jews who escaped Europe and went not west, but they went east to Hong Kong. There are people who went to Shanghai as well. And how do you celebrate the Jewish New Year in a land where there are no the only Jews are the people who have escaped from Hitler. That's from Apples and Honey. And then there's Finding Forgiveness by Rebecca Garden Levington from Farrar, Straus and Giroux. Carbon was originally started in Rockville by, I believe it was Joni Sussman and Madeline Groner. It has since been bought by Lerner Publishing Company and moved to Minneapolis. They publish a lot of Jewish books. So it's great that Lerner, who publishes a lot of books that are much more marketed to the school and public library market, it's a lot of like nonfiction series of stuff, but they are committed to Carbon and the Jewish books that they publish. Apples and Honey is an imprint of Berman House. Berman does a lot of I would consider like Hebrew school kind of books, much more traditional religious study kind of books. Apples and Honey is their children's wing, and FSG is just a regular mainstream old-time publisher. Then we've got Hanukkah, and I decided to just focus on Kalani Oak. Kalani Oak is fairly new. They are in a Scranton suburb called Music. I probably would never have heard of Music or know where it was, except for my kids went to the Reconstructionist camp in South Sterling, Pennsylvania, and Music is nearby. And I remember going to the movies there. And so they put out these 4 books for this past Hanukkah. A Dragon Called Spark, a Hanukkah story by Lily Murray. And so it's kind of an imaginative story of a girl who does not look entirely, she doesn't look white, which is another kind of thing that we're seeing in a lot of books. We have Ori and the King of Darkness by Nati Bate from with Carmel Ben Ami. I think that's set in Israel. And then we have The Littlest Candle, a Hanukkah story by Rabbis Carrie and Jesse Olitsky. Carrie Olitsky has written a lot of books for Jewish kids. He's a big voice early on in writing Jewish stories for the mainstream market. And then Hannah and Larry Stiefel, Mendel's Hanukkah Mess Up, which is just a funny story. Hannah Stiefel is actually a friend of a friend of mine. She is a doctor in New Jersey, but she has taken on writing books. These are all books with imaginative stories, not necessarily white characters, not necessarily living in all Jewish neighborhoods, and various twists on the meaning of Hanukkah for kids. Let's go on. Then we have Passover, and there was a lot that came out. Carbon had Talia and the Passover Haggadah by Linda Elovitz Marshall. She also has written a lot of Jewish books. Hungry, Come and Eat, a Passover story by Leslie Kimmelman, another big name. As you can see, this is a Seder with a very diverse group of attendees. And then North South Books, which does a lot of translations, with the Passover Pet Surprise, which is by Ana Maria Shua, which is set in Buenos Aires. And so we have another view of the Jewish world. Jews aren't just in America. We're not just white. We're not just from Eastern Europe, and we're not just Ashkenazi. Let me go on. New Baby, a really great thing. Leslie Newman and Susan Gall have collaborated again for Joyful Song, a naming story. This is a baby naming there's 2 moms in this book, and there's a real diverse group of people who attend. It is a joyous book, just like the cover and the cover art. That's from Levine Carrito. Mazel Toes by Audrey Barbakoff is as you can see from those nice chubby legs, a delightful new baby gift, delighting in a new baby in a Jewish household. And then Room for Baby, which is 2012 by Michelle Edwards. And this book follows a pregnancy through the Jewish calendar. And so as you read through the book, you see that the calendar change, and you see the different holidays being celebrated as we build up to the baby being born. Not only do we have birth, we have death. These are all 25 and 2026 books about sitting Shiva, lighting a yahrzeit candle, visiting a grave, from some great writers. Again, Leslie and Newen, Something Sweet, Kathy Kacer, Memory Stones. Kathy Kacer is Canadian. She has published a huge number of books. Most of them, but not entirely, are Holocaust fiction. Um, and she publishes mostly with Second Story Press, which is a feminist press in Toronto that does a lot of, they just publish a lot of Jewish stories, even though that's not they're not exclusively a Jewish publisher. Barefoot Books is a smaller publisher, the Remembering Candle, and then A Flame Burns On, Lighting the Yahrzeit Candle by Richard Ho. Richard Ho is Chinese. He is a Jew by choice. He was just I heard a podcast interview by him, and so he has written a lot of books about that intersection of being Jewish and also being Chinese and how that plays in his life and in his children's lives. Some other books for older readers that have to do with death and mourning and grief are All Three Stooges by Erica Pearl, who I think lives in Northern Virginia, from Knopf. That's a story about friendship and friends who don't know what to say. And we've got a bar mitzvah coming up in that one. Joanne Levy's or Levy's book, Sorry for Your Loss, from Orca. The story behind this one is that one of the main characters is a girl whose parents run a Jewish funeral home, and there are aspects of the Jewish funeral process that are written about in this book in a very beautiful and gentle way. The mother married into the funeral home family, and she trained as a social worker. And the daughter said, "Do you ever feel like you're sorry that you gave up your career?" And the mom says, "I'm still doing my job. I help people with their loss and their grief." And there's another story that is about a boy, and there's a whose parents died in a traffic car accident that is woven into it. It's a beautiful, devastating book. And another equally devastating book is Leah Shire's The Last Words We Said. This is set in an Orthodox community in Atlanta, the year following the disappearance and presumed death of Danny, and how his friends and family are dealing with it. It has it's a tough book, but it's a book for all readers, not just Jewish readers. It really brings the Orthodox world to everyone, and about teen relationships and just what families do and how grief and hits everybody differently. Let's go on. Let's see. I know I've been going on for a long time. Okay, I'm gonna speed up things a little bit. Okay, we've got some immigrant books. We've got Gittle's Journey, yet again by Leslie and Newman. That was a AJL. That was a Sidney Taylor Silver winner from Abrams in 2019. Nathan's Song from 2021, and Letters from Cuba by Ruth Behar. Ruth Behar is Cuban American Jewish. Her parents and grandparents immigrated to Cuba because that's where from Germany, because that's where they were able to get in. They eventually left Cuba, like many Jews did, and went to Miami. But this is the story of the immigration to the U.S. Then we have books about Israel. Now, somebody asked a question about books set in Israel. Honestly, there's not a lot. And one of the reasons I've been mentioning the publishers is because I wanted you all to see whether books are being published with Jewish content by mainstream publishers or by just Jewish publishers. And when I did a search for books that would likely be found, they're all by these Jewish specialty publishers. Um, I I don't know what to say about that. There's some other books that have been set in Israel during like the Six Day War and some of the other wars that I think a lot of these books are unfortunately only being picked up by libraries serving Jewish communities, be it day schools, synagogues, um, community center JCC libraries, and probably public libraries in larger Jewish communities. I am not sure that a single one of these is in Montgomery County Public Libraries. I honestly didn't check. Um, Call Me Gebanyash is about an Ethiopian Jewish girl who emigrates to Israel. It is a picture book, and how her teacher can't pronounce her name, so she said, "We're just going to call you Rachel." And it's by Gabanias is one of the authors of the book. Roadside Seder, and I apologize, you can't even read the author of that. That was Apples and Honey 2025. There's a big pile up. Everybody's heading to their Seders. Everybody's got their food, and a tree falls across the road, so everybody has a communal Seder together. It was a fun book, but I don't even think my system bought it. The Blue Butterfly of Cochin by Ariana Mar Marishi with illustrations by Siona Benjamin. Siona Benjamin is Indian Jewish. This is about immigration from Cochin, India to Israel. So the immigration to Israel by Indian Jews, and then The Delightful and a Cat from Carmel Market, where it's just a raucous shopping trip where this woman picks up her groceries and all the things she needs, but she also picks up a cat at every stop. Um, let's see, what else do we have? Now, in terms of content of books, I've talked a lot about books for younger kids. Now I'm going to talk about books for bigger kids. There's a lot of fantasy. There's a lot of fantasy and science fiction in the greater publishing world for youth in general. Harry Potter really and the Lightning Thief books really set off a lot of authors and publishers to publish a lot of these imaginative what if worlds. And Jewish authors have not forgotten about that either. So Night Owls is by Ariel Vishny. That was 2024. Those are owls from Jewish mythology. There's romance in it. There's some darkness in it. I believe it's also a queer love story. Likewise, for When Angels Left the Old Country by Sasha Lamb. That's by Levine Carrido, which I will talk about in a moment. That was a really fun book. There's an angel and a Dybbuk who do some immigration because they're looking over people. I mentioned City Beautiful because that was one of my books, one of my Sydney Taylor years by Aidan Polydoros. Aidan writes a lot of science fiction, fantasy, horror books. I don't know what's going on in his head, but um, they are detailed explorations of the dark with very Jewish content. Anya and the Dragon is the first of supposedly a multi-book series, but as far as I know, only two have come out. Her books, these are books that you can tell that they are Jewish books. They're set like in the 1200s, but they don't actually say we're Jewish. But everything about the story is a Jewish story. And again, sometimes a Jewish story is a story that you're reading a Jewish story. There's Yiddish sprinkled through added, or Hebrew sprinkled through added, or people celebrate holidays, or they do things, even though the words "we are Jewish" is never presented in the book. The Inquisitor's Tale by Adam Gidwitz, which is a Newbery Honor, and it was also, I believe, a Sydney Taylor Honor by Adam Gidwitz. That is a kind of like a Canterbury Tales quest, and one of the kids in the book is Jewish. Aviva and the Dybbuk is by Mari Lowe, who is an Orthodox Jew, and she is producing some amazing books. This is Dybbuk's and Golems, feature heavily in a lot of fantasy books with Jewish content. Um, Sweep, The Story of a Girl and a Monster by Jonathan Auxier, who is actually not Jewish, but the monster is a golem. And that got a Sidney Taylor Award. And so that's an example of a book with Jewish content, even though the creator is not Jewish. Um, Back to this picture. This is from the U.S. Holocaust Museum. This is the multi-story tower of photographs that Yafa Eliach created to recreate her hometown. And that book, The Tower of Life, How Yafa Eliach Rebuilt Her Town in Stories and Photographs by Chana Stiefel and illustrated by Susan Gall, won in the picture book category in 2022 from the Association of Jewish Libraries. It also won the Robert F. Seibert an honor, informational book honor also. And I happen to have served on that committee. And so I'm really proud to have served on two committees, not simultaneously, that saw this book, a Jewish book from Scholastic, as something so important to present to not just the Jewish world, but to the whole world. It is sad and yet such a book full of light and life, and how she makes sure that the people of her community aren't forgotten. Holocaust books are like 50% of books written for Jewish kids. There's gobs of them, gobs and gobs and gobs of them. There's lots of memoirs, there's lots of biographies of all different lengths, lots of books about Anne Frank, lots of books about the Kindertransport, lots of books about righteous Gentiles, lots of books about the resistance both of Gentiles and Jews. There are concentration camp books. Those are really hard to read. There are books about survivors, and there's a lot of books that are dual narratives with dual timelines, where it's a modern story and then they jump back in time, often to a grandparent or a great parent's childhood. The Holocaust is important to remember, but it is not our entire story. There are books, and to answer a question that probably hasn't been asked, while most of the books are set in Eastern Europe, there are more books that are being set in France, in Northern Africa, in Greece, Italy. There are definitely China. There are books that are being set about the Holocaust that are not just set in the places everybody thinks about, because it's important to show the massive range of influence of the Nazis and their devastation they wreaked on the Jewish world. Let's see. So, Number the Stars is often read in elementary schools. It's by Lois Lowry. She's not Jewish as far as I know. Came out in 1989. It won a Newbery Medal. It is the story of the Danish evacuation of the majority of their population. I was in Copenhagen last fall, and I went to the Museum of the Resistance, which was an amazing museum. And one of the things they have there is one of the fishing boats. This was not a large boat. A book that came out in 1987 from Berman House is David Adler's The Number on My Grandfather's Arm. It is a book with photographs of a child asking about the tattooed numbers on her grandfather's arm. There's since been a short movie made, and you can watch it on HBO, or you might actually be able to find it on YouTube, The Numbers on My Great-Grandfather's Arm, because, as we know, Holocaust survivors are very old if they're still alive. And then, of course, Tower of Life. I'm almost done here. who is publishing these books? Mainstream publishers are publishing these books. When I was doing the credit for these, I discovered that Penguin Random House was the publisher of a lot of the books that I selected here. I don't think it's their particular goal, but that just seemed to be it. But there are some um, specifically Jewish publishers. I will say I did not include in this the more religious publishers that publish things that are much more to the Orthodox audience or for more like Torah study and study of Hebrew and stuff. Geffen, Hachai, or books like that. I have read books like that by them. They are fine books, but they're not books I'm going to have in the public library. And so your ability to find them is going to be a little harder. Um, the specifically Jewish publishers of children's books are Apples and Honey Press, which is an imprint of Berman House, Carbon Publishing, which is an imprint of Lerner Publishing, iconic children's book reflecting the rich cultural diversity of today's Jewish families, Kalani Oat, also that's a fairly new publisher, also has the same kind of thing. They're really trying to do a lot of diverse voices. Intergalactic Afikomen is in Seattle. And they try to do really upbeat, sometimes a little off the wall books, but there's lots of Jewish joy in these books. And then there's Green Bean Books, which is based in London. Although their mailing address is like a military history publisher in Barnsley, West Yorkshire in England. Michael Leventhal started Green Bean Books. He is delightful every time I send him some reviews from the AJL News that we've published. Sends back always a very nice thank you letter, email to me. He publishes a lot of books that were originally written and published in Israel. I have to be honest, a lot of the books are the quality of the illustrations and just the vigor of the story is not quite equal to a lot of the stuff that's coming out in the US. PJ Library. My kids are 24 and 27. They were too old for a PJ Library. I'm sure a lot of you know about PJ Library from your children or grandchildren. PJ Library is a nonprofit of the Harold Greenspan Foundation. They mail out books so that Jewish kids get Jewish books in their homes. It's an amazing project. I think you will see a lot of PJ Library books in used book sales. I think people just get overwhelmed by the number of books. You get a lot of them when their kids are little on a regular basis, and then as your kids get older, they can select the books. Sometimes they are the original publisher of the book. Sometimes these are original manuscripts. They are first-time authors. Um, People have, maybe they're letting the market, maybe some of the books aren't the greatest, but still think it's an amazing thing. And it's a way for people who live in places where they aren't getting these books in any other way, or they're an interfaith family, or they're a family that wants to have some kind of Jewish um, context in their children's lives. I think I don't see any complaints from it. I also want to give a shout out to Levine Carrito. Arthur Levine is the founder of Levine Carrito. He's a longtime editor, and he has written some books. He is Jewish, he is gay, he's a Reconstructionist, and he started Levine Carrito to bring underrepresented voices to print. So he has done a lot of Native American, First Nations books. He has done a lot of Asian American, Latino, queer books, a lot of unheard of books, but he's also done quite a number of some outstanding Jewish books that are stories that are not, we're having a bar mitzvah today. Oh my God, I'm so scared. He's really reaching out to try to make sure that the world sees everybody, and specifically Jewish books as a big, big, wide world. The name is Levine for him, and the Q is for Querido. It's Querido. It's not Querido, it's Querido. It's named for Emmanuel Querido, who was a Dutch Jewish publisher who died in Sobibor. And this is his way of honoring the past of Jewish publishing in Europe. And then Second Story Press is a feminist press in Toronto that publishes a lot of Jewish content. Do I have anything else? I'm going to go really fast. I've talked about a lot. Holocaust books, holiday books. There's also Jewish life, everyday Jewish life. We've got No Vacancy by Tzipora Cohen, a first book. It's a very Jewish book. Family-owned motel is having problems. They need a miracle, and a Jewish girl and her Catholic friend kind of come up with a way to find a way to save their hotel. It's very Jewish, a very good book. Turtle Boy I already addressed. Honey and Me is about the power dynamics of friendships, particularly girl friendships set in a Jewish day school. Dubious Pranks of Shandy Goodman by Mari Lowe is also set in a Jewish day school. It's got the mean girls. It's got the manipulation of middle school girls set between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and talking about Teshuvah. It was an amazing book. We have historical fiction that is not just Holocaust. We've got one set in 1492 Spain, A Ceiling Full of Eggshells by Gail Carson Levine. Also, David Knight set in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance. A boy kind of sneaks out of his Jewish orphanage to go experience life. Sky Full of Song is 1905 North Dakota. A Jewish family moves out there. And then there's The Hired Girl, set in Baltimore of 1911. And here's the flip. The Hired Girl is not the Jewish, but this is a well-to-do Baltimore Jewish family and how their hired girl learns about Judaism. Big world of Jewish identity. We have, again, we are not just white Ashkenazi Jews. We have Jewish Cuban stories from Ruth Behar. We have Sephardic County books by Ruth Arroesti. And we have Shoshana, Nambi, who is a Ugandan Jew. She's a rabbi, and she is writing a series of books set in Uganda featuring Shoshi and having a Jewish life in Uganda. We have lots of interracial, interfaith, adoptive children seeking their Jewish identity when people look at them and go, well, you're not Jewish because you're not white. You must be something else. And so there's lots of stories that are about that. And then we have books about anti-Semitism. And I promise you, I am almost done here. Anti-Semitism is a topic of books and is a topic of some recent books. Gordon Corman's Linked uses links, the whole idea of paper links or paper chain links to commemorate the 6 million, but the story is started because somebody has spray painted swastikas in a school. Don't Feed the Lion, which is a new book by a small publisher by Arcadia, is what do you do when a sports figure says something anti-Semitic on social media? And do you blow it off or do you do something about it? Red, Green, Blue, and White is by Lee Wynn from Levine Querido, and this takes place in the 1990s in Billings, Montana, when a Jewish family's house was defaced in some way, and the community rallied around them, and everybody lit menorahs. The Assignment by Lisa Weimer is about a true thing that was going on in Wisconsin schools. Let's debate. What do you think about the final solution? Good or bad? I can't see your faces, but I'm assuming you are shocked. And so she wrote that book about that assignment in a fictionalized way. And then the last thing I want to mention is Blackbird Girls, which is by Anne Blankman. Um, this was one of my Sidney Taylor Honor book, and I threw this in at the last minute. It said at the time of the Chernobyl power plant meltdown, and two girls, one who is Jewish in the way you could be Jewish in the Ukraine, which really wasn't much, and another girl who is Christian who has been taught to be anti-Semitic because that's what she was taught, are evacuated and they go off to the Jewish girl's estranged grandmother, and they learn tolerance and friendship and to evaluate people as you know them. And there's a second story taking place during World War II about the kindness of strangers in, I can't remember if it was Kazakhstan or Tajikistan, who took in the grandmother when she was a child. Um, and then hopefully this is almost the end. Social activism. Jews have been part of social activism, and this is also featured in books for kids. A lot of biographies. As Good as Anybody by Richard Michelson is about the friendship and relation and social activism of Martin Luther King and Abraham Joshua Heschel. Fighting for Yes is about Judith Heumann. People's Painter is about Ben Shahn, who used his um, Jewish background of looking for justice for people and rebuilding the world with kindness and justice to use his art and not just in a decorative way, but to speak with it. And then Girl by Clara Lemlich. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I know we're doing it. And I wanted to just end with a whole bunch of recent books celebrating Shabbat. We have books about baking challah. We have books about the senses of challah. This is My Shabbat is a book about a blind boy and how he experiences Shabbat. That is from Green Bean. Um, these are just joyous books bringing Shabbat to Jewish and non-Jewish children. I am going to stop sharing because I've talked for a really long time, I realized, and I went over. So, what I'd really like to know is, what does everybody have to say? I'm gonna look at, oh my God, there's so many things in here. I want to thank you for listening to this. I did not even touch on everything. There are lots of queer stories. There was a lot of neurodivergent stories. There's a lot of stories about interfaith families. There are stories for everyone. And I don't see that the pipeline of stories is ending. That is the good news. The bad news is um, are these books available in the mainstream? Meaning, can you go to your public library and get these books? That is a question I don't know the answer to because I don't get to select books. Okay, All right, so let's
Um,
take some questions.
this has been extraordinary. I will
Thank
take,
you. I know I talked a lot.
no. I will take my prerogative and at least give you a minute or two to catch your breath.
Thank you. I'm going to take a drink of water here.
And I hope in some way this can be compiled into some sort of anthology. I mean, this is so rich, it can't just be for tonight. Okay, I'm going to ask you some sociological questions.
Okay, let's see if I know the answer.
All right. It seems to me, knowing nothing, that this must be an efflorescence of books on Jewish themes. Is this true? And is it true from when? From the 90s? That this
I
incredible wave of books on so many areas, when do you see it getting this momentum?
I think since the turn of the 21st century, I think that that's when there's been this massive uptick in books because I did kind of go back and look to see for dates. I was looking to see like books from my own childhood, and I wasn't coming up with a huge amount from the 70s, even from the 80s. I think as time has gone on, there's more and more, and we're moving away from the I have a bar bat mitzvah. What am I going to do? That's still a kind of a big storyline. Um, or the Helm stories and folk tales, and of course, Holocaust stories or just immigrant stories. I think it's really a 21st century thing, and it goes hand in hand with the recognition of publishers that not every kid is white and Christian. And I mean, you see this reflected on TV. You see Jewish characters as main stories. I mean, I've never watched The Pit, but I know people go crazy about that. Seinfeld was a big deal because even though there was nothing overly Jewish about the story, we knew Jerry was Jewish on Seinfeld.
No, no, no. I mean, there are zillions of questions
Right.
in terms of the response of
Yeah.
parents and of children. Have people been doing some studies of the responses, particularly of children and the different ages who see these books?
Could you say it one more time? Sorry.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I'm so much richness there, and they have readers, and many
Yeah.
of them are Jewish children. What kind of responses is noted by the children themselves?
I think they like seeing these books. I think kids like to see themselves in a book. Kids like to read good stories. And I think a good story that speaks to them, whether it makes them laugh. There are kids who like sad stories. I had kids who go, I'm going to go through the shelves and look for pink books because I know if it has a pink cover, I'm probably going to like it. Why not? I mean, I have been known to pick bottles of wine based on the labels because I like the picture on the label. Um, I think, there are kids, but it takes adults in these kids' lives to get these books in their hands because there are a lot of kids who read what they're gonna read. And that is not as much, well, my kids are big now, but I didn't have as much of that problem when my kids were little, although I would say my son was a massive rereader and sometimes getting him to read a new book was hard, but I definitely see a lot of kids who they want to read the same books over and over again. And I saw there was a question about what do you suggest for a kid who likes The Wild Robot? And that's a great series that um, and I'm trying to think. I think at this point my head is a little brain dead, but I will get back to you. And um, if I don't answer you tonight, I will try to answer you in email. Yeah, but it takes parents, grandparents, teachers, librarians, other adults in their lives, shout it from the bema, to get these books in kids' hands. Um, a lot of the fantasy books, I think, have a really good readership. They have really catchy covers and I mean, we do judge books by the cover. Sometimes you look at it and you go, yeah, I want to give that a try. Or sometimes you go, no way, because I don't like the cover. Um, I see Lori has her hand raised. Do I have to unmute you?
No, no, I
No.
just unmuted myself. I was so looking forward to this, Judy. You have not
Well, thank you.
disappointed.
I feel
I've
like it just
scribbled.
lobbed everything at you.
Oh, no, no, no. I've just been scribbling all sorts of notes that I hope I can read or transcribe. I asked this in the chat earlier, and you said that, this was not something that you could answer, but it's something that really perplexes me about current Jewish children's books. Being an educator, when very young children need concrete examples, I've been told that publishers now are staying away from books that anthropomorphize God.
Mhm.
And I'm very perplexed by that. And I would love to know if anybody knows what the thinking is about that. Because for me, there's no problem for a very, very young child anthropomorphizing God so that they can relate, but then not dropping the ball, so to speak, and moving on to a more adult slash spiritual. I don't know the proper term, but
Yeah.
I'm very perplexed.
I don't really have any knowledge of that, so I can't really speak to that. Um, my my world of Jewish books is both is through what I either review or read reviews of as an editor of the book reviews for a Jewish organization, or what I see coming through the public library. Because I don't do the purchasing, I know that there are things that we are not getting that I wish that we had. It's just there's only so much money and so much space. Um, I would guess that it's probably the more religious publishers you're going to find some of this. I would say that probably Geffen, Hachai, some of the more religious, the publishers that really get more into the concept of God as opposed to Jewish values. And
Hmm.
I don't even remember if I showed that slide. I had a slide on Jewish values in books, and they're mostly. I think that that is more the universality of the message. Um, I mean, I don't see a lot of God in books that are not aimed at Jewish readers either, because I think that that's for a specific audience, and that's not what we buy generally in the public library. Not to say that there aren't public libraries that buy that kind of thing, but it's more of a specialty, a kind of a niche market. I don't know if that really answers your question in any kind of satisfying way. Um,
Let me intervene
yeah,
here. We probably can't go too much longer.
yeah.
And wait. I want to at least conclude on this question. First of all, you're an extraordinary repository of knowledge, and there are not many people like you. So, in a public library in Fargo, North Dakota,
Hmm.
how would people in a public library even know about these books? Who would give them the impetus to find out? How does word emerge of this real extraordinary wealth of books?
Um, I would say PJ Library is, and they have a great website because even if you just use their website, um, they have it's a great way of finding titles and little descriptions of books. The Association of Jewish Libraries has an amazing website. It's jewishlibraries.org. They have a lots of book lists. You can get a list of every single Sidney Taylor Book Award winner back to 1968, which I forgot to mention. There is also um, the Jewish Kid Lit Mavens Facebook group. I don't use Facebook, so I'm not part of that, but I do also review for the Jewish Book Garden, which is I think at this point it's a Substack. Um, but that's something you can subscribe to or just go to their website and see reviews of new stuff. They don't come out, they don't overwhelm you, but um, there's there's a lot of things online, ways to find new books. I believe I will create a bibliography of every book that I mentioned, the ones that I didn't get
Oh my
to,
God.
plus also some resources about some articles I read, and also some other resources of place, and I'll send that to Jerry, and he can send that out to everybody. But that will have there's a lot of books, and I want to address, or actually, can we invite Marjorie Gann to speak? Because I recognize her from camera, and I'm kind of in awe of her being on the Zoom with me. Um, and she had a comment about books about Israel and books from Israel that I think she's probably in the position to talk about that more than I can because she's more in the know.
Does she want to say something?
Yeah, do you want to say anything, Marjorie? Because I can read your comment in the let's see. Okay, so
I'm
okay.
not sure she's still here.
Okay, so
Oh, yeah,
Marjorie,
there she is.
there she is. Okay, Marjorie, who I've never met in person, I don't think. Is she there?
Margie,
Yeah.
Margie Memories?
No, Marjorie Gann.
I don't see Marjorie
Okay,
Gibbs.
so she said a while ago that on the issue of publishers and books on or from Israel in translation, she spoke with an agent from Israel. Even before October 7th, she couldn't sell books to the mainstream publishers. This kind of subtle soft boycott. I have heard that from others too. Um, Books in translation are, it's a whole nother area of book publishing and reading. And there are so many books that don't get published in English um, for English reading kids. And um, yeah, it's an issue. It's a real issue. Um, I have to point out that I have noticed Montgomery County Libraries buying, because they're newly available, a lot of books. We have a lot of books, just like Jewish kids need to see themselves, Muslim kids need to see themselves. But we have gotten quite a number of books that have Palestinian authors and characters. And I don't see an equal number of books coming in within specifically Israel centric viewpoint. It could be that our selectors aren't realizing that Jewish books and Israeli books are different. I can have a discussion with her about that, but I just thought I'd throw that out there because I think that that's something I've noticed, and I've noticed that when I, put together a book display. I see Jeanette's hand up.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I actually work with Marjorie. We both worked on the literature project. Marjorie is really the expert on the anti-Israel literature, and I've curated books with content regarding true to life Israel, Israelis, and also connections of Jews to the land of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And we currently work for the Foundation for Truth About Israel, FT Israel. And Marjorie is really the expert here. I just texted her to see if she would rejoin, but it is her incredible research that has really exposed all of the patterns of the omissions and lack of accurate information about the connection of Jews to Israel, accurate maps about Israel,
Right.
and as well as the omissions of the reasoning for defensive sort of strategies from Israel in order to protect its citizens. So Marjorie is really the ultimate expert on these books, and there is really not even close to the counter sort of information with accurate information about the historical accounts of Israel, either for picture books or for middle grade, but definitely picture books we find more. And there are some that have been written that are phenomenal, like The Miracle Seed, and that have won multiple awards. But for middle grade, there are very few. There's Tamar Stein's books about the hero.
Was that, and then there's like Benny's War.
And Benny's War, those two
all right,
series.
Marjorie's back.
Oh, Marjorie, I texted her. Marjorie, please. I was introducing how you're really the expert on the anti-Israel books for kids and the propaganda.
Then we should take Kristen's, because her hand's been up for a while.
I'll let.
Okay. Thank you, Jeanette. Let's see. Can we recognize Kristen? And then I don't know if Marjorie wants to say anything, because you guys are more than let's see.
If she starts talking, I'll find her.
Okay, and then Kristen, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I did, and I certainly don't want to cut off Marjorie, though. No, I don't want to be that person. But Judy, I really want to thank you, and hi, Mindy. Hi, Jerry. First of all, I want to salute you and all the librarians. I'm the daughter of a retired NCPS librarian, and she was children's librarian. And I review children's books for an Italian American magazine, and I feel like I have attended a graduate seminar tonight. I am the Catholic friend to my many Jewish friends, and I had a question for you, because really, to me, this read like an ethnography. I learned so much. I loved the All of a Kind series, the Judy Blume series. As someone who's played Big Anthony going to get the baklava in the church play, I learned about some of the palace books that I want to look at now. But I wanted to ask you, Judy, it seems like the books on which you focused here are either published in or geared towards an audience based in the United States. And I wanted to ask, is that considered, and obviously I'm thinking of like Italy and America too, for my own purposes, like, how is that talked about? And then how did you get into, how did you develop? I mean, you are really an expert on this topic, and I can't wait to see these book titles. And I'm just curious because you said, I think you said you write reviews for books too.
I
And
do, and I'm a children's librarian. And
so
I've, yeah.
how did this come about? I mean, you're a children's librarian, but I would describe you, I mean, I'm going to make a lot of phone calls talking about you as the
Oh
expert
God.
on, and I will be talking about this with my mom this Sunday, but I'm just really curious as to how this evolved for you, and because it's clear that you're very passionate about it.
Well,
And
thank you. Thank
seems
you.
like you've done
Yeah.
the first, I don't know if it's the first, but it's certainly a complete study of
Oh, there's other
children's
people who
books.
have done way more than me.
Really? Okay, I'd love to hear, and I'll stop
Yeah,
talking. Thank
there's
you.
definitely other people, and I'm kind of wondering if Heidi there is Heidi Rabinowitz. I don't know who knows way more than I do. But I mean, I got into this because I'm Jewish and I was a reader, and um, and I got onto some committees. And once you get on a committee with the Association of Jewish Libraries, they pull you in. And so after I finished my time on the 2 years on the committee, they're like, "Hey, Judy, do you want to are you going to review some books for us? Hey, Judy, you want to be the first editor, the first editor of these children's book reviews?" And I'm like, sure. And my husband is a scientific editor. He's a physics editor. And so sometimes I'll be going, oh my God, could somebody possibly use a few more commas here? I do edit and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. So I edit books. So I learn about books, even I haven't laid eyes on them by reading their reviews, which is a lot of what librarians and booksellers do is they read reviews. I have had jobs where I have gotten to do the selection of books. I go to conferences and I hear other people talk about books. And I think it's just, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been a librarian for 40 years. And I think I think in terms of your earlier part of your question, yeah, this is focused on United States and by, broader connection, Canada. Um, these are the books that I see. These are the books I I think publishing for books for children is a massive thing in the US. There are certainly traditions of books for children in other countries, in other languages. It's not, um, it's the view of children, it's the view of education, it's the view of learning. Um, there are definitely books in England with Jewish characters. I think that's what Michael Leventhal with Green Bean Books is also trying to do, get books that speak to British Jewish kids with his books. I know I read and reviewed a couple books by Ivor Badiel, who's or Badil, David Badil, who wrote Jews Don't Count, which is for adults. And and his books are, they're fanciful. Um, yeah, there's a lot of books. There's so many books, so little time. There's a lot of books out there, and what I say to all of you is if you have kids in your life, get them reading books, use the resources, go to the AJL website, go to PJ Library. Just, even if you don't get the books from them, because you can only get them if you sign up with them, and I'm not really sure the age range on that, but they're a great resource for finding titles of books. I've seen lots of other things mentioned here, and I mean, I didn't talk a lot about books that are like much more about Jewish learning and Jewish values. There are definitely books that are much more, I hate to say theological, but there's a lot of books that are definitely that speak much more to Jewish kids in a Jewish context as opposed to being Jewish, if that makes sense. Um, I, there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of things I skipped. Um, there's people look for books for a lot of different reasons. And, I think, Jewish families should be reading books, encourage their kids to read books and to read books to their Jewish children about, so that they have a knowledge and they have a pride of things, because it's hard. It's hard if your kids are in public school and everybody's like, oh, what are you doing for Christmas? Or what do you mean you don't celebrate Christmas? Or, I mean, I remember having somebody go, well, we don't celebrate Christmas. And, well, I know Jewish people who have a Christmas tree, and there are books about interfaith families too, and I didn't even go into that. That's like a whole nother talk. There's just, there's a lot of books. There's a lot of books on different topics. And that's what the world of modern literature is. There's books on everything. And I think more and more publishers in general are trying to make sure that unheard voices are heard. Because, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. Everybody deserves to see themselves, and everybody should learn about their neighbor.
One last thing before
Yeah.
we probably really should.
Yeah. This is really long.
Okay. People, I don't need to tell you, are conservative, reform, reconstructors. Well, in these schools, seminaries, the teachers should instruct people about this world. You have synagogue librarians, certainly not in every synagogue, and they probably read some of your reviews, but not all. How about you're giving a talk to the Jewish Theological Seminary, or Yeshiva University?
I would do it. I think there's a couple of people who are a little more qualified. I would say Heidi Rabinowitz, who is in Florida, who runs the Jewish Book Garden, is extremely knowledgeable. Susan Kusel also, who's in Northern Virginia, who is a fount of knowledge. And I'm hoping she wasn't here tonight because I'd be really embarrassed. All right, Marjorie, who I've never met in person.
You've just read my reviews.
Yes.
Well, just a few things about books related to Israel. I spend about half my year in Israel, and I have grandchildren there. And half the world's Jews, or just about half, live in Israel, and nothing like half of these Jewish books, nowhere near half, had anything to do with Israel. Right. And the problem is getting books that speak of Israel positively, and there's so much positive to be said about Israel, getting them published. And people may remember the scandal a few years ago when the book called Once More with Chutzpah by Haley Neal came. It was review bombed on Goodreads before it was even published. So why? Because it mentioned a birthright trip, and the publisher had to withdraw the book and make her rewrite it and drain the Judaism and drain the Israel out of it before they could honor their contract with her. So that's really what authors who want to write positively about Israel are up against. And as you pointed out, the publishers are the niche publishers. They're the Jewish publishers, Carbon and Apples and Honey in particular. And I met an agent of a major publisher's agent for coffee at a cafe in Jerusalem a couple of years ago. I sat down with her and I asked her what was happening. This was more than a couple of years ago because it was before October 7th, and she was already running into a kind of barrier. And it was not an official BDS, but she could not sell her books if they had the I word in it. And the I word is Israel. If it was anywhere on the cover, it could not get published. So what did she couldn't, the big five wouldn't look at it, the big five publishers. So what did she do? She said, well, I can sell these books, but it's to the small Jewish publishers. The advance for an agent. The agent gets a percent of the advance. And if the advance from one of these small publishers is very low, the advance from Penguin Random House is very big. So she does the same amount of work and she gets a minute return on it, the same percent, but it's a percent of a small advance. So it's not really that lucrative for the agents to sell to Carbon and Apples and Honey. So that's really what Jewish authors who want to write about Israel are up against. The other thing that I thought you referred to a couple of times, you said, I don't even know if these books are in the Montgomery Public Library system. And I know that some work is being done right now on looking at the proportion of pro-Israel books and Jewish books in the public libraries versus, say, pro-Palestinian. And people are comparing because somebody out there is the acquisitions librarian. And who's acquiring the book and who's sort of quietly not purchasing these books? That's another question that we have to ask. So there is one positive thing. I don't think Michelle Orel was on this call, but she's a woman in Israel who started the Am Yisrael Chai project. And she is working with not PJ, it's the Hebrew branch, the Israeli branch, Sifriyat Pijama. And they're translating some of those Hebrew books for children into English and donating them to JCCs. She's cooperating with JCCs in the United States to get those books that portray Israel positively and realistically in translation out in the hands of Jewish kids in the States. So it's an uphill battle.
Thank you.
We don't want to end this. We really don't, but we must. Jerry,
I think
would
we
you
do.
please come in? Jerry, where are
Okay,
you?
I will do that. Where's my? Let me get myself on. Well, I thank you very much for the great presentation. I so many comments. I don't want with over time, but one thing, Susan Kimmel was asking whether you can have a listing of the books, and you were saying a few minutes ago you might give a bibliography, but there's so many books, and I guess you were saying at some point that books are for any minority group, including Jewish groups, so people can see themselves, but also it's good that people can see from outside of that group the people. So what you're saying, or what the comments in the last 10 minutes or so basically have shown, is that Jewish kids more or less can see themselves in the books, but nowadays the non-Jewish kids can see somewhat of the Jewish kids. They can't see half of us, which are Israelis. Like my daughter now lives in Israel. So it's a real difficult, real issue, I guess. Just one comment, about books saying things they're Jewish. The book that you and I mentioned in a discussion, and it's mentioned a number of times today, was All of a Kind Family. And part of where I found out about it was I was the librarian for my synagogue when I was in Richmond. But I started reading the books, and I didn't see anything saying that they're Jewish. I mean, clearly, after I read it for a while, it was a Jewish family, but it didn't say Jewish. But they were doing Jewish things, obviously. So
right, and sometimes that is what makes a Jewish book, that it's not a flat out, we are Jewish and this is what we are doing kind of thing. Likewise, just because a book says, oh yeah, and I'm going home to light the Shabbat candles, and that's the only thing that's in the book, that doesn't make it a Jewish book. That it's the overall content and context and reading between the lines kind of things. Of
Well,
they definitely in all the Khan family books do celebrate, because I remember there was a Passover one and somehow somebody got sick and so they were quarantined and they couldn't eat Hasidic foods and something like that. I don't know. I mean it's been a while since I've read them.
yeah, well, there's a whole series, obviously. Maybe I didn't read that one, but besides your bibliography, and really, people should look at the recording because you mentioned so many books. I think I would like to include the chat box because there are a lot of great comments in the chat box, and I think I'll send that to people when I send the email, but I won't include it. Well, your bibliography, I will include it if I can in the email, but I'll also put it into a Google folder that we referenced on our website. But I won't put the chat in there because I think it's more personal, for some privacy. I don't see the privacy too much sending it to people who have, well, some people haven't come, but anyway, I'll sort of debate that a little bit.
But 1 second, Jerry, 1 second. Judy, you would like people to be in touch with you, yes? So we'll have your email in this as well, and I'm sure you'll start rich new dialogues with some of the people tonight.
Yeah, we'll discuss things later with Judy about what should be included, what should not be included. We'll do that after the fact. One further comment. You mentioned that you got into reviewing books for the Jewish Library Association. So did Mindy. We had a class about the Jewish libraries, and Mindy joined then, and now she's reviewing books for them also.
Oh, okay.
So the two of you are reviewing books.
Right. I think that's how you found where I worked and got a hold of me.
I don't know how Mindy found you somehow.
Actually, I thought it was an interesting topic, and I asked around.
Oh.
And your name came to me. I think it was from the librarian at Addis, Israel.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you all for listening to my ramblings. There was a lot more I could say.
It was extraordinary.
There's a huge world of books out there, and there's many more stories to be told. There's a story for every one of us.
I was amazed by your presentation. I mean, how many things you were talking about. It's unbelievable. Okay, so I think we're going to cut this now. Coming attractions, 2 weeks from today, we're going to have a class. What's Monty's last name?
Lazar.
Monty Lazar, talking about Jewish choral music. He's sort of the impresario or whatever of Jewish choral music, and so we'll have classes on that, and then other classes are in development basically. So we'll see what happens. Okay, we'll end this now. It's not going on forever. It looks like it's going on forever. We'll end it. Okay.
Okay. Good night, all. The Hitraot. Hope to see you all.
Figure this out. Bye, everyone. Shalom Lechem.
Okay.